49ers lost to the Bears in a game that they fumbled early. Looked like then they were able to get a little control of the game. Were not able to capitalize on opportunities. The Bears hung around. Justin Fields made plays. And the 49ers, we spent a lot of time talking about how it compared a little bit to last week. You've got some games early in the season, last year. You got some games early in the season, too, that you should win.
Easy landing spot.
Easy landing spot. Last year they did it. This year they did not. Weather a factor? Maybe, but both teams played in that weather, as somebody on Twitter said to me. That's correct. And the Niners are 0-1.
Yeah, I think there's no way around it. When the dust settled and you lose 19-10 week 1 against the Chicago Bears, who I thought, you thought, I'd say universally, most people agreed were going to be terrible. You lose by 9 points, as we got them as a 7-point favorite. Game open, I think, ended up kicking off at 6.5, but easily one of the biggest favorites of the opening weekend. Everyone's picking you, including myself, to be right there for the Super Bowl, and you lose the game. There's no other way. It's an embarrassing loss. It's not a devastating loss in the sense of like it's week 1. You got a lot of shit. Obviously, got 16 more games. The Rams have already lost. I got the Cardinal game on the background. They're getting throttled. So a lot of football.
We'll see what happens Monday with Seattle.
Yeah, I actually kind of like Seattle in the upset there, but ultimately I think most people would agree Seattle's not going to be that good. But in a vacuum, the Niners are playing the Bears. You got to win that game. Now, like you said, the weather was clearly a factor, but everyone played in the weather that attended that was in the game in pads and a helmet, right, on both sides. They all same footing, same shitty field, same Bermuda grass that didn't have any drainage. And here's the other thing, guy. If I would have told you this on Friday, hey, they're going to lose, be like, well, did they lose? Were they losing the whole game? They just have a terrible game. They were up 10-0 in a weather game where at one point in time, someone tweeted at me like, hey, the Niners have 150 yards and the Bears have like 17. They were, I text someone, the score does not reflect what I'm witnessing because they're beating the shit out of them. Remember the first drive of the game, they go right down the field, Debo fumbles. But this is what I say all the time about the sport of football, unlike all the other businesses we work in. It is so black and white. Being up 10-0 and kicking their ass and, after halftime, who gives a shit? You lost. You lost by, honestly, a pretty wide margin. I mean, 9 points in the NFL, that's a pretty big, cap.
Yeah. Yeah. And they were not, they didn't get they didn't convert late. They were not in any position. It didn't feel like they were not one drive away from winning that game, right? To your point, 9 points means you're 2 drives away from winning that game. And even before they didn't pick up the 4th down, their pace was terrible at the end of the game. They could not get the ball down the field. Like one of the things we talked about, and we'll talk about Trey. We'll start kind of big picture here. But one of the things we talked about a lot going from Jimmy Garoppolo to Trey Lance is that when you need a big drive late in a game, it's tough when it takes you 15 plays to get down the field, right? And the clock is not your friend. Well, that last drive, John, it took them 12 plays. Okay, they're down 2 scores. They get the ball down 2 scores with 7 minutes. Took them 12 plays and almost 4 minutes to get to their own 46-yard line. Now, that is a situation where, the rain, all that stuff was a factor there. But 12 plays to get to my point is just they were not about to drive the field. Even if they converted that, get the ball back and drive the field again. It was just a very tall task, to your point, that 9 point, it was a wide margin, 9 points. And it really, easily should have been 11. The Bears missed 2 extra points.
Yeah, I mean, guy, they got outscored in the second half 19-3. Like, that's just in a weather game. Like, we hammered this. I don't think I quite knew. I wouldn't have changed. We knew by the time we were going to make the bet and we're dead set that the weather was coming. Early on, we felt very strong about it in the week. I didn't quite understand the rain. I don't think even if I knew that it was going to be as rainy as it was, I would have taken back at least my part of the bet, like pushing for it. I know we were in agreement, but
are you blaming me?
No. My point is like, I'm just saying, like, I don't think I would have changed if I would have known the weather going into the game. Though I think it's pretty clear it's just hard to score. So once you're playing in a game that's going to be very, very hard to score, especially with a young quarterback that's going to be an up and down roller coaster ride, that you score 19 points and a half in a rain-soaked game where it's tough to move the ball. Like, no one's going to have 500 yards of offense. Like, that's a problem. And, we can talk about Fields a little later, but you hit some crazy big plays And the Niners did not hit crazy big plays. Honestly, they didn't really hit any plays in the second half. It felt like, right? Besides just a couple of little runs, and they just were not hitting plays.
They hit Jennings for 44 yards on a 3rd and 6 in the third quarter that led to the field goal that made it 10-0.
Was that in the third quarter or the fourth quarter? Or I mean the second quarter? They were up 10-0 at half, right? No.
Yeah,
they were up 7-0 at half, and they scored the field goal.
8 minutes left in the third, and then he hit Jennings again later to start that drive after the Bears scored the touchdown. But anyway, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, there's nothing explosive. But once the rain starts coming down, unless you do pull plays out of your ass, like, you're not going to be explosive. So if you're going to give up 19 points and a half, it's going to be a massive problem. And not just 19 points and a half. Once they kicked that field goal after the Jennings play to go up 10-0, they gave up 19 unanswered points.
Right.
So, like, this wasn't going to be, even if the Niners were on, they weren't going to score 30 points in this game. Like, to me, if they had a good game, what 24-ish, 25, like that range. So you give up 19 points and a half and 19 points unanswered, that team is going to be in the game. If I just told you that the Bears during this game scored 19 points unanswered, if we knew that going in, we would definitely not have bet on them.
Well, right? It would have been one of those where even if the Niners capitalized on all their offensive opportunities, that equates to a backdoor cover easily in the NFL.
Yeah, so
right?
it's 25-19. We push or we lose for sure.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's weird. Like, I don't think the defense was terrible or bad by any means, but you give up big plays that lead to touchdowns, and they did that twice. It's a problem because the Niners didn't capitalize when they had the opportunities on big plays to score touchdowns.
Yeah. Somebody on the stream says, relax, it's week 1. There's no doubt. But I think we just go back to last year when they made the playoffs by a very slim margin, and the games they won at the beginning of the year were big games for them, and their schedule is difficult this year. But
yeah, I think part of this, we can only just react to the Bears game. Right? We're not allowed to react to the week 4 Rams game. Why? It's fucking 3 weeks away. We can't react to them just beating, the Chargers. That hasn't happened yet. Who knows? They may not win that game. They've played one game and they lost. And I just saw someone in the chat, and here's where I do think there's no overreaction. Like, I'm not changing my stance on the season by any means. I still feel very good about them, but they have way better players than the Bears. And this is not the NBA or Major League Baseball where the Yankees can lose 8 straight games to bad teams, right? The Warriors can lose 3 or 4 games in a row and try to win those games, and ultimately it doesn't matter. In football, you only get 17 shots of these, and now it puts that much more emphasis when you play the playoff teams, like your margin for error in those games, when you don't win the easy games. And I'm not changing my stance. Like, I don't think the Bears are going to be very good. I don't think they're going to all of a sudden win 7-8 games. I had texted a buddy in the NFL, like, could they win one when the 49ers? Obviously, they already got their one, but I still view them as a 4 or 5 win team. And when you lose to those type teams, which happens every year, remember on the Super Bowl team, they lost to the Falcons late in the year, and that Falcons team was really bad. So you're allowed, when the totality of the season happens, and if you win 10, 11 games, no one remembers that specific game. Maybe they do if you don't win the division, right? If it's a difference between one game when you sweep the Rams or whatever, and you're the wild card and they win the division because of that game, like that, like every game does matter. But right now in the vacuum, like, I'm sorry, you lose to a team that you are way more talented, that, like, everyone has agreed upon. We all played on the same shitty ass fields. It's not like their players, and you could argue that neutralizes the talent.
I would argue that.
I would agree, but it's a fact, but you still got to take advantage of it.
So, like, to what you just said, I think there's always, and we've talked about this a lot, there's 2 things that come out of every game: the math that the result of the game creates, and then what you think would have happened if that game were played, what you really think of the way the team played, right? So the math is just the fundamental thing that does not change. It doesn't matter that if they had played in a dry place or on turf or in San Francisco, that you come out of the game, you go, yeah, I still think Niners win that game by 10 if they had played somewhere else. Doesn't matter for the math. They're 0-1. Now, there is the other conversation, which is, does this change the way you fundamentally look at the team? Do you think they might be worse than they are or than you thought? That's where the weather comes into play. Like, that's where you can say, all right, I'm willing to give them to understand that against a better team, the Niners might be better because, their advantages won't get neutralized in the way that it felt like their pass rush a little got affected by the fact that it was very difficult to corral Justin Fields, which is going to be hard even on dry fields. I thought it affected that today. Maybe it's harder to defend, whatever. Like, I thought Trey looked a little uncomfortable with his footing, all those sorts of things that you go, okay, in a different environment, maybe they win that game. So I think what it sounds like what you're saying, I know this is what I'm saying. Fundamentally, it's the math is what hurts the most out of it. We'll have a bunch of conversations after that about, do we need to reevaluate anything about how good they are or Trey or, the Jimmy thing? Obviously, people will talk about all week. The defense, was this defense going to be as good as all that kind of stuff that, those things take weeks to get answered.
And luckily, the core guys of this team, right, from Debo to Juszczyk, I know Kittle didn't play, but to Kittle, to Trent, to Fred, to now Hufanga. I guess Hufanga wasn't technically a starter last year, but he played a lot. Obviously, all the other linebackers, Eric Armstead, Jimmy Ward will come back. They have been through a lot of losses in weird spots last year. They lost 7 games, and about 5 of them felt just debilitating, right? So this core group, just in recent memory, just in the last 12 months, has felt these shitty feelings. But there's just no way around it. Like, it doesn't impact your overall success in December. This is a terrible loss. Every single human would be in agreement that it is watching from a 49ers angle. It's a terrible loss. Yeah. I think universally people are going to say, around the league, like, the Niners are dramatically better than the Bears. So anytime a dramatically better team loses to a team, that's a bad loss in the NFL, right?
Yeah.
Like the Bengals lost to the Steelers. I think the Steelers have one of the best defenses in the league. They have Mike Tomlin, who has never had a losing season. Is it ultimately that terrible of a loss in overtime? Like, no. I mean, it sucks losing a game, but would you agree that's like the Bengals lost, the Niners lost? I view one loss dramatically different than the other loss.
Yeah, I mean, I think unless you're going to go win 12 or 11, 12, 13 games, which anybody can, but unless you're going to do that, then then one individual game can swing your season in terms of just the math at the end when you're trying to become a playoff team. And when a season begins, no matter how good anybody was last year in the AFC North, you look at it and go, Steelers, Bengals, split. Ravens, Steelers, probably split. Bengals, Ravens, probably split. Like, that's to your point. Like, that you just assume you're going to lose one, you're going to win one, right? So that's part of the reason I think it's very different. And, the other thing is, like, Joe Burrow had 4 first half turnovers. I think you can go, that's not who Joe is. We've got a bigger body of work on Joe than we have on Trey Lance. We're still trying to figure out exactly who Trey Lance is. Now, no quarterback gets judged by how they play in that environment necessarily. But I do think if you're a Bears fan, you come out of it pretty happy